Good morning. It's great to see all you guys today as we get to kick off sort of our summer season. And just for the record, I love it when it's 95 degrees and high humidity. So to all of you who complain about that and brought in this weather, this is not my fault. We're going to keep. We started this last year, this idea of a summer Sabbath. And it's designed to take an entire season for us to recognize that there's disrupted rhythms. This is a whole different way in which we sort of live our lives, right? You think that summertime, you're all excited about summer because you get all this stuff done, and your kids are home all summer, and your rhythms are all jacked up, and you spend half the summer being frustrated that you can't do all the things you did in the fall because they were gone for like 9 months, and now everything is chaos. That happened to me years ago. I remember just getting so worked up for summer, so excited, vacations and all the thing, and you come back from vacations and you're more stressed and anxious and mad than you were when you started and all the things. So we want to take and acknowledge the fact that summer is a very different season and to prepare ourselves for it. We're more transient. We have disrupted rhythms. We have just a lot of things that are at play. This is a really great gift that we can receive if we'll take the time and do this together. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next 10 weeks as we prepare ourselves and experience this idea of summer Sabbath, specifically focusing on the idea of delight. From years ago, I remember the church had just taken off. And there were seasons in our church that were just literally, I didn't think I could breathe. It was just so fast and so all-consuming. The demand was endless. And so I don't know if you've ever felt like that, when you get into these patterns, maybe your seasons of life when your kids are small or jobs demanding or whatever it is. This was what it was for me. And it was just so busy and so fast. And we'd gone on vacation. We have some friends of ours who have a cabin up in the mountains, and his wife is an artist, and she paints all these beautiful pictures. It's at the foot of Grandfather Mountain, overlooking Grandfather Mountain. And we were in the house, and she has all these paintings around of what she had, of paintings of Grandfather Mountain and all the mountainscapes around the area. I remember looking at all these paintings, and they're so beautiful, and I'm thinking, who has time to paint, right? Just frustrated that who has time to enjoy all the beautiful things in life, because we're busy. And I remember just thinking, this is not good. That year, my word was inspire. And I thought when I started off, this is gonna be a way for me to kind of, amp myself up and be able to really inspire our congregation to, depths of faith and all those things. But I realized that it was really more about what God wanted to do in me, that I had been a long time since anything had moved me or inspired me. I needed to really recalibrate some things and find some ways in which I could live this out. In fact, God has given this to us in our very, the way we're designed and wired and the way the calendar was created with this seventh day, this Sabbath rest. And it's throughout the scriptures, God gives us and entrusts us with this rhythm, this life, not only life-saving, but life-giving rhythm that he expects us to sort of honor. And in Isaiah, God is speaking through the prophet Isaiah, and this is how he specifically talks about the Sabbath. And I want you to listen to the wording of this. If you keep the Sabbath, if you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath, and doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's day honorable, and you honor it by not going in your own way or by not doing as you please or by not using idle words, then somehow we honor God's space, this time that he's given us, but not doing what we please and going our own way and speaking idle words. He says, then you will find your joy in the Lord. That's interesting to me what he says. The Sabbath, he doesn't say you honor the Sabbath, you're gonna find recalibration and recuperation and ready for Monday. But that if you learn how to treat this Sabbath seriously, you're gonna learn what it means to delight in the Lord. You're gonna learn how to find your joy in the Lord. And it's been a long time since a lot of us were inspired, because we are sort of taught, our default is to be productive and to make things happen and to organize and orchestrate. It's all about sort of our intellect and our reasoning and our proficiency and our efficiency and our capacity to get things done. I remember one of my favorite non-Disney movies. I have to qualify this because my top 7 are Disney, but one of my favorite non-Disney movies is Dead Poets Society. I don't know if y'all remember this movie or not. It's from 1987 or 88. Yes, maybe, Robin Williams. Dead Poets Society. If you haven't, go watch it. I had 2 14-year-olds come to me after after early service had watched and said, this is one of my favorite movies. I'm like, you're awesome. You would have loved the 80s. Too bad you're not there. And, but it's the story. I watched this movie. I was 18 years old, starting my freshman year of college. And I remember thinking, I'm gonna be an English teacher. Like it's the story's about this English teacher. Robin Williams plays an English teacher at this prep school. A bunch of wealthy kids, it's a boys' school, are all there to be trained to be doctors and lawyers and engineers, and they're to make, to follow on their family names and all the pressure that comes along with that. So they're all there, and Robin Williams is this sort of unorthodox English teacher, and he teaches them to love poetry and all the different things, and he's teaching English literature. And so he goes through this, and it's extraordinarily done. It's like Carpe Diem and, oh, Captain, my Captain, all the things are from this movie. And I remember there's this one scene, and they're all kind of groaning about poetry and why we have to do this and how's this gonna help us. And he says, get everybody around me. And they all gather around me. He sits down on the floor, and they're all huddled around him. And he goes, we read and we write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. Medicine and law and business and engineering, those are noble pursuits to be sure, and they are necessary to sustain life. But beauty and poetry and love, these are what we live for, right? And it's this idea, you're like, I want to be an English teacher. You want to do it, you're just inspired and moved. There's something deeper in us that calls us to be alive. For those of you who've been around very long, you know that whenever I'm drawing sort of a representation of humanity or the old stick figure, I don't use stick figures, I draw them like this, right? Y'all have all seen this? Yep. Kind of on a mission to make sure that no one ever draws stick figures again. This is much better representation. Because this sort of connotates the essence of who we are. There's something about us that longs to be alive. I'm a simple guy, and so part of my philosophy of teaching and the way I sort of think about theologically is I've tried to build a base or a foundation, a frame, and then out of that sort of find out where everything else layers in so that it keeps it all distilled and simple. So I have these three very simple convictions that I follow. Conviction number one is that if God created life, then he alone gets to define it. So the idea is that whatever makes something gets to define something. That if God created life, that's a C, created life, then he gets to define it. The second one, and we'll put this up on the screen because this is where we're going to launch from, is that every longing at its core, every desire at the very center is actually a longing for life. What we want is to be alive. We don't want to just breathe and take up space. We want to feel alive. We want to feel what it's like to breathe in the world around us and to drink in beauty and all the things that make us feel full and whole and real. That's what I'm talking about. Every longing at its core is a longing for life. And the third one, of course, and I just wrote this down and I don't have time to go into it today, but that Christ is life. And this is sort of the foundation from which I want to build on today. Every longing at its core is a longing for life. Everything that we pursue, we want to reconnect and to experience something of that which we have been made for. And it is that deep in every human being. And I remember wrestling with this because as a kid, a lot of my life, especially my life with God, was spent trying not to do the things that I thought God didn't want me to do. And it's a really fun game for a while. And then it gets really old because you realize you can't do it, and you either stop believing in God or you can't do it and you stop believing in yourself. Like one of the two things happens. And so I found something very differently in the way I began to pursue it. It was from a lot of pursuing the scriptures, learning how to spend personal time with him, learning what it meant to worship God. I don't mean just sing songs, but like to let my heart be moved by God's creation, let my heart be moved by God himself. And it was a lot of effort and time and discipline in learning how to do these things, but it helped me to realize this is why I want so badly. This is why I want so badly and so deeply. And it helped me sort of find some things about myself. Now, one other thing that you need to understand, when I think about how we are as people, and again, you've seen this before, but that we are always, always, always being formed or shaped by something. And this is the process. And again, you've seen this, but the process that I use, or the way I think of this, is encounter, formation, expression. I hear some of you saying it. Thank you. That makes me very excited. If you've been here a long time and you do not know what this is, I'm just kidding. This is the process that whatever we encounter, whatever we experience, whatever we see or behold shapes us. It forms us in here. It forms and shapes what we want. And then out of that comes the activity of our lives. I'm gonna talk more about that in just a minute, but this is how you got to be the way that you are. This is why you do the things the way that you do them. And from the very beginning, God has called us and created us with the capacity to delight and to be moved and desire. The garden in the Genesis is called what? Eden. It means delight. That's what it means. Everything about what God had given to us was to awaken us. He's created us with desire to delight in beauty, and he's also given us the means to experience it. So I want to read this. There's a progression that you see in the fall. This is from the famous scene in Genesis chapter 3. I'm only going to read one sentence. I'm not going to get any of the semantics of it because you know the story, right? Adam and Eve are in the garden. Satan comes along, tempts Eve. Eve eats the fruit. She gives it to Adam, and the whole world breaks. That's the basic gist of it. But I want you to watch the progression of this. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, it says, when Satan comes along, the serpent comes along and says, God didn't really mean that. He's just holding back. She put an idea in his head. A thought in her head. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, when she saw that it was good for food, and that it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took the tree and she ate, and its fruit, and she ate. Do you notice a progression there? This is how we tend to operate. There's a thought, an idea that pops into our heads. Maybe it's suggested to us. Maybe it's something from experience, but it pops into our head, and then there's an attraction. Oh, that looks fun, or that looks good, or that looks beautiful, or I'd like to have some of that. And then out of that, there's a desire, and that is a thought that is informed or formed by the attraction. We see something, we go, oh, I like that. And then we say, now I want that, and I want to calculate how I'm going to get that. And now we have these thoughts that are formed by what it is that we want, by our desires. And this is where I want us to be really, really careful, because this is what's happening to us all over the place. As we think about an encounter, what basically the currency of encounter is an encounter really is something that grabs or holds your attention. It catches your eye because it's a lure. There's an intensity of an experience that you have, and now it has your attention because you're either afraid, you have to protect yourself, or whatever it is, but it's something that has to do with our attention. One of my principles that I operate by, and this is what I want you to really pay attention to, is that whatever catches your eye will eventually capture your heart. Whatever catches your eye, whatever you encounter, whatever you see and behold is doing something, is shaping something in you that is developing desires and passions and allegiances and affections. And this is always happening, all the time. In fact, if I really wanted to get on my soapbox, which I will a little bit, but one of the things that's happened in the last 10 to 15 years, if you've worked in the digital world or particularly IT product development for apps or such, there's a phrase in the industry that says, if you aren't paying for the product, you are the product. You may have heard this before. So if you get a free app, it's not free. They're basically selling you. And what has happened is, 15 years ago, a person would go to a company and say, would you buy advertising with me? And then that person says yes, and they purchase advertising from me. And then I take that advertising and I sell it to all the people, right? Get it in front of all the people, and I get their message in front of all the people. And now we've switched in our culture. Now what I do is I take your attention and I sell it back to whoever will purchase it at the highest bid. And so now every day our attention is being bought and sold all the time, every day by everything that we're doing. And this is not without effect. We have lost the capacity to steward our attention. This is one of my big things that I've struggled with most of my life. And I'm not talking about, just ADHD or ADD. I'm talking about something deeper than that. That whatever catches your attention, whatever catches your eye will eventually capture your heart. And you have to be aware. There's a reason they call it paying attention, because it has a price to it. And we have to begin to understand this is the currency of all of our encounters. Whatever it is that grabs your eye, whatever it is that allures you, whatever it is that pulls you, it is feeding your desires. It is causing you. This is the way almost everything that we encounter in our world works, from the news to all the advertisements, is basically to try and grab your attention, and it will do anything to get it. And it creates all these base habits, these debased habits that we end up sort of ruling and wanting and inadvertently governing our desires. So we have this idea of encounter. I think everybody understands what that is. And then expression is essentially basically the sum of our attitudes and our actions revealed in the way we actually live our lives. The challenge is the speed at which our culture works is the process from encounter to formation to expression is like that. And that feeds the easiest and the worst parts of the human desire. And what we neglect is that this space here needs to be formed, needs to be transformed. So how do we do this? Years ago, I remember I was doing some research. I was doing a series on mental health. And it's probably 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago now. And I remember going back through and looking at sort of anatomy and the human body and all the different systems in the body. And I saw something really fascinating, that every system in the body has a mission statement. Like I just Googled on Wikipedia, like, your circulatory system and your digestive system and your all these things. And so I just Googled respiratory system and it'd pop up and say the respiratory system is designed to oxygenate the blood. And then the circulatory system is designed to distribute those oxygenated cells to all the cells in the body. And the digestive system is to distribute nutrients. And everyone had like a one-sentence mission statement. You remember this from like 5th grade or whatever we were studying this? You draw the little invisible man with the gross thing. And then I looked up the mind. And all it said was the mind serves as the executive center for the body. And I'm like, but what does it execute? Execute what? Like if it's the executive center, it has to execute something. So what is it? There's nothing. Well, this explains a lot. Nobody knows what we're executing on, so it's just free for all. And this is exactly what's happened. And so over the years, this started back in the Enlightenment when reason became the highest form of understanding, trying to reduce things down to their components so we could understand them, and then understand them when we could control them. And the human mind has done brilliant things, right? Brilliant things. I mean, look at the things that we've invented, how far we've come as human race. I mean, all the things. In fact, we're about to invent ourselves out of existence with artificial intelligence. Did y'all know this? And just so you know, in case this message is bad, it was actually written on ChatGPT, so I'm not taking any, I'm just kidding. But we've done extraordinary things. But this has long been, since the Enlightenment, since the Renaissance, since all this happened, this has long been a thought about how is it that people still encounter and experience God and these more nuanced experiences of humanity. I'm not talking about just feelings or emotions. I'm talking about something deeper than that. This deep core longing that we have as humans. That it's more than just flesh and blood. It's more than just neurons firing together. It's more than just physiology. We all know this. Blaise Pascal, mathematician, theologian, he wrote this. He says, the heart has reasons of which reasons knows nothing about. We know this in countless ways, and he goes on to explain. He says, it is the heart which perceives God and not reason. That is what faith is. It is God perceived by the heart, not by reason. Are reason and apologetics important? Of course they are. But what God is asking us, he doesn't want our response to him to be a spiritual act of logic. He invites us to have our spiritual response to him to be an act of worship, to encounter, to behold something, to have our jaws dropped. Brian Zahn wrote a book called Everything's on Fire. It's brilliantly written. He says this, he goes through this dilemma of if we keep valuing reason and intellect over the reality of this depth of longing. He says we may very well cut ourselves off from that which is intellectually unknowable. The rational mind is capable of amazing accomplishments, but it is not an organ suitable for experiencing God. Attempting to use the rational mind as the organ for experiencing God is rather like trying to smell a rose with your ear. And although our minds can do brilliant things, right, they're designed for something else. When I went through this experiment, I tried to say, Mike, what do you believe about the human mind? What do I believe about my mind? Because I'm trying to learn how to think. I'm trying to learn how to understand things. I've got a very curious mind. I've struggled with attention for a long time. I've done a lot of these things. So I'm trying, what do I believe about this? So the statement that I wrote down is, for me, is that my mind is designed. God has given me my mind and my capacity to think in order to awaken my heart to more beautiful realities. I tried to start to think about this, to let my mind muse on this, to reflect on this, so that as I learned and grew and read and tried to grow in that capacity, that it wasn't just intellect. It wasn't just I was getting smarter and better able to explain things, but that something was happening in me, that there was this transformation. And what I've learned is that the mind, right, this is how the Bible teaches this, that the mind is where the war for the soul is waged. We got to learn how to think. But we have to learn how to think in such a way that it awakens something in us, that there's a transformation in the things that we want and we desire. This is precisely how it is written for us in Romans chapter 8, verses 5 through 6. And this is going to be difficult because we have created tools in our culture that keep up with our shortening attention spans, right? The gap from here to here is like that. And our phones can keep up with us. In fact, they can do it for us often. But we have to have these habits that disrupt the natural pace and the appetite of what it is that we want. All of us have habits, and all of us have, some of them are good and some of them are bad. And all of us have habits of delight, things that you do on a regular basis that make you feel alive. Things that you look at, things that grab your attention or hold your attention, that do something in you, that form and shape the things that you want. And if you're not sure what your habits of delight are, your phone actually has a record of them for you. Go look at your TikTok For Me page, or go look at your search bars on your on Instagram. All the things that are on there are things that device believes are going to get your attention. And it's based on the fact that this is what it believes, your habits of delight. This is what's going to be the thing that causes you to find life. So we have this in its place. And so the scriptures come along, and they've been doing this for, in this case, almost 2,000 years. This is from the writings of Paul, and it's brilliantly written. There's so much in there that's brilliant. These are two verses out of Romans chapter 8, and it says this: those whose lives are arranged according to the flesh, those who live according to the flesh, have their minds set on what the flesh desires. So it's giving agency to some part of us that wants things, right? That's giving, hey, there's a part of us that wants things that if we're governed by these things could lead us to trouble. That those who live according to the flesh, their minds are affected by these kinds of desires. But those who live according to the Spirit, or have their arrangement around the Spirit, God's Spirit, they have their minds set on what the Spirit desires, and what God desires, and what His intentions are. The mind, and then look at the language here, the mind that is governed by the flesh is death. But the mind that is governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind that is governed. What this means for us is that you and I have to pay attention to what holds authority in our minds, in our thoughts, because it's always shaping us. Listen, a lot of people believe that you just are the way that you are, and that if you can't pay attention, you just can't pay attention. Listen, I believe that you can train your mind and your thinking, and I believe you can learn how to pay attention. It is not easy. It takes a ton of work, but here's the reality. If you don't learn how to pay attention, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of options that are more than willing to take your attention and to use it in whatever ways best suits them, regardless of the condition of your soul. And you cannot depend on anything to change that. There's nothing that's gonna happen in the foreseeable future that's gonna prevent that from happening to you or to me. And so what I'm telling you is we had better learn how to be great stewards of where we put our eyes, of where we give our attention to, where we pay attention, because it does have a price. It's more telling than what we even know, because what happens to us in this place, right? We have this place in us that desires things, that want things, and wants them fiercely. And one of the kind of light bulb moments for me is when I learned and realized that I can actually want wrong things. Did you know that? That human beings have the capacity to want all kinds of things that are terrible. And like half of them were in my brain. And so I'm like, what do I do with this? How do I reconcile this? And it was a lot of these passages. This is why for a long time, right, I've tried to learn how to align my thinking, how to give God's intention and his will and his way authority in my thinking so that it begins to shape the desires of my heart. It begins to shape the way that I am. You know, this is why I set a timer when I read. I can't read very well. I keep a journal with paper and pencil. This is why I read out of paper books. And oftentimes I'll set a timer for 10 minutes. I don't have any notifications from my email or Twitter or Instagram, no notifications on my phone. I put it down, I set my timer for 10 minutes and I read, and I don't move until the alarm goes off. And I go, 10 minutes, and I set it for 10 more minutes and I keep going. And I've taught myself that I can pay attention if I'll simply be willing to pay the price of paying attention. It's hard, but it is life-saving. Right? We all have to learn how to do this. We're gonna spend some time this summer practicing this. Psalm chapter 115. This is this ancient poem written about what happens to us when we build things, systems, things that we can depend on that sort of give us the illusion of life. When we build these things that we think are gonna give us a sense of accomplishments, a sense of life, a sense of satisfaction, here's the assessment in Psalm chapter 115. He's using the ancient idea of idols made with our hands, but we just talk about the things that sort of we control that bring us life. But their idols are silver and gold made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, and eyes but cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, and noses but they cannot smell. It's given us this imagery that the things that we have depended on can't respond to us relationally. They can't interact with us in a human way because they don't have the capacity. They're inanimate objects. We sort of put our allegiance to this. And he continues on, they have hands but cannot feel, feet but cannot walk, nor can they utter a sound with their throats. And then look at this in verse 8. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. You know what the lesson is? That we will become, like we will come to bear the image of the things that we trust. We are designed and made to bear the image of God. But our unchecked desires and wants will lead us to be reformed into all sorts of different things. So when we kind of get to the summer, right, this is what we're gonna be doing. This is our definition of delight that I want for us to use this summer, because delight is in emotion. It's not something you can manufacture. You can't make yourself will this. But delight is an encounter to something good. Right? We behold, we experience something good, and then that goodness is allowed to awaken us to what it is that we want, or to some version of wanting. And what this psalm reveals to us is we're gonna encounter all kinds of things that will attract us and pull us. And we'll find all kinds of good in them. And in doing so, we will come to bear the image of the things that hold our worship and hold our delight. So it's allowing this to shape and to form us because it's happening all the time. So here's sort of the main passage. And this is what we're going to be using as the bedrock for the entire summer. Psalm 37:4, most of us have probably heard this at some point in time. Psalm 37:4 is to take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. It is a beautiful passage. You can memorize it, you can hold on to it. I heard this when I was probably in high school. And when I got in college, it became one of my go-to verses. Do you know why? Because it was a great promise. It says, if I delight myself in the Lord, he'll give you the desires of my heart. I said, God, I want to be rich, so I'm going to delight myself in you. Here we go. And that's how I thought of it. And what I began to find over time, over years, over decades, is that learning how to delight in the Lord, right, isn't always automatic. There's a lot of things that vie for my attention. There's a lot of things that catch my eye. It takes a lot of will and stopping and slowing and arranging to say, Lord, can you help me see something in you that awakens my heart, that brings me to worship, that brings me to see you? What I found is over the years that, yeah, God gave me the desires of my heart. It's just the desires of my heart at 19 or 20 or 21 were not the real desires of my heart. They were desires that would have led me down a really, really difficult path if I'd have become like the things that I was worshiping. When he says, delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart, it's an invitation for you to trust him. It's an invitation for you to become, to be formed in the image of what you long for the most, to discover that Christ himself is the embodiment of all the life that God wants to give us. And he has made a way for us to experience that with fullness and with freedom here and now if we will trust him and let go of pursuing all the things that reform us or misform us or misshapen us into other images. It's a great book called You Are What You Worship. And this is a quote from James Smith. He says this, worship works from the top down, you might say. In worship, and this isn't just singing songs, this is like us posturing our heart to behold and to see and to delight ourselves in God and who he is. And sometimes it just starts with a prayer, Lord, could you help me to see you? In worship, we don't just come to show God our devotion and to give him praise, but we are called to worship because in this encounter, when we give our attention, in this encounter, God remakes and he molds us top down. Worship is the arena in which God recalibrates our hearts, reforms our desires, and rehabituates our loves. Habits. I've been married, Jill and I will be married in about 3 weeks, 31 years. That's a long time. I was literally getting me some tea, but thank you for that. I was like waiting for the applause, I was literally getting some tea. We were married 31 years, and I've learned a lot in 31 years. I remember we were married probably about a year in, and I wrote down a list in my journal of things I love about Julie. And the list has grown some, but it's still very concise. And I remember writing that list down. People would ask me, says, man, why are you writing a list down? Can you not remember them? I'm like, well, I can remember them, but I'm pretty sure all the things that annoy me are going to get a lot more attention than the things that I love. So I want to pay attention to this. What it did is as we got to be older, we had children, one of the things on that list was, one of the things I loved about Julie was the way she was as a mother to our children. And here's why that's important. Because when you come home from work and you're tired, you want to make it all about you. And you want to demand all the things from everybody, including her. And if she feels obligation to me and obligation to her, and she feels competition from me to them, I begin to erode and undermine the things that are actually on my list. I had to develop habits in order to honor the things that I love, to reorder, to rehabituate, to stay focused on making sure that I was seeing and giving attention to the things that were ultimately going to shape what I actually wanted long term. And it's this kind of simplicity. It's a habit. It's a habit. All of us have habits. All of us have habits that we do without thinking about it. If you don't believe me, just tonight when you go home to brush your teeth, try to brush your teeth with your left hand or your opposite hand, and you will realize how little you think about brushing your teeth when you're brushing your teeth. Because you will not be able to be like, dude, what's my right hand doing while I'm trying to brush my teeth with my left hand? Because we get in these, and you have to develop habits of delight that are going to incline us in a direction that's going to lead us to the kind of life that we long to live. So here's what I want you to do. This is your homework for the summer. We're going to start today. I want you to consider this, that you will become what it is that you desire. That's the trajectory of where you're headed. So here's the inventory. This is the practice for you. Make an inventory of the things that you delight in. And don't go, I delight in my gardenias. I get that, but it's probably been a long time since you've actually stopped and looked at your gardenias because you're coming in from work and you're flying around. I'm talking about when you get home and you want to sit down on the couch and you want to turn on Sports Center or whatever it is that you want to do and just not be talked to for 50 minutes. That's what you delight in. You'd write on that list, I delight in not being talked to for 50 minutes. And you just write that on your list. Take a real inventory about what you really are actually finding delight in today, currently. Not the things you like to take. It's like when you look at the art, you go, who has time for this, right? Like, of course the art's beautiful, but I'm mad about it. And so you want to get yourself to give yourself some real clear assessment. God desires truth in our innermost beings. Second question is, what do you most easily delight in? What is the easiest thing to grab and hold your attention? I'll just leave it there. We all know. Like this, you can check your phone and it'll tell you. Does this numb your senses or awaken them? Some of us, the delight is in a few beers, a couple of this, and it's because we're trying to get away. It's numbing. It's not awakening our hearts. It's numbing us to the realities of our lives. These are all habits of delight. You are looking, every longing at its core, trying to find something to delight in. So what is the easiest thing for you to delight in? What desires are awakened out of these delights? When you see something on the news or something you do, what do you want to do? What's the desire of your heart in those moments? What's the trajectory of those desires? Like, finish the story. Delight is serious business. It is serious business. Because the things that you and I learn to delight in are going to be what ultimately captures our affections. That will lead us to the kind of lives that we live, that we treat other people in the world around us. So the invitation is to delight yourself in the Lord and to entrust to Him the desires of your heart, that maybe, just maybe, He could form them into the kind of person, right, that He longs for you to be, that He could form them the way He intends so that you get to experience the kind of life that you actually long to live. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Can we do that? All right, let me pray for us. Father, I thank you for the provision of your gospel, that you have, that you are pervasive in our innermost workings and intimacies of how we think and feel and are wired. Father, that our affections, our attractions, our pulls are so powerful. And Father, we need you to enter into those places and be God to us there. Father, I ask that you would give us truth in our innermost beings to really come to grips with the orientation and the direction of our lives. That God, we would find you to be gracious and good, and we would allow your goodness to awaken in us what we really actually want. Father, I thank you. You've made a way for us, and I thank you that you have promised us. You've made a way for us to experience the kind of life for which you intend, and you've made it possible in your Son, Jesus. That is in the name of your Son, Jesus, who is our King, that we pray. Amen.